Well, hello and welcome to Understanding the FAFSA Submission Summary and Financial Aid Offers. My name is David Bartnicki, Program Specialist with the Policy Implementation Division. I'll be your host today, and it's an honor to be with you. These are two very important topics as you begin and continue your journey in financial aid. So let's go ahead and get started. As you can see, today's agenda has a lot of information we want to cover. We will touch base on the FAFSA confirmation page, as well as the FAFSA submission summary. We will also review some of the key sections in the FAFSA submission summary. We will also touch base on what are financial aid offers, why are they important, and especially if you are planning on attending more than one school, then also comparing financial aid offers. We will do a couple of knowledge checks just to test your knowledge to make sure that you're coming away with some of the key information we hope for you to retain. And we will finish with some additional resources and references that you can take away after today's session. Now, I mentioned we will touch base on the FAFSA confirmation page. What is that, and why is it important to you as you continue your financial aid journey? Well, it's important to note that the FAFSA confirmation page will appear to you immediately after you, the student, submit your completed free application for federal student aid, otherwise known as the FAFSA form, online. You can see here on the slide an actual example of a screenshot of the confirmation page. This will provide next steps that you might need to take, as well as an estimated student aid index, or SAI, an estimated federal Pell Grant if you are potentially eligible for Pell Grant. It'll also provide some information on how to check the future status of your FAFSA form. Now, I mentioned the student aid index. What is that? It's important to remember that this is an index number that's calculated using the information that you provided and your contributors provided on your FAFSA form. Your SAI helps schools determine how much they'll be able to package financial aid for you, both need-based and non-need-based. But it is important to remember that this SAI number is not what we expect you to pay for your school expenses. It's also important to remember that this confirmation page is not your financial aid offer, nor is it your FAFSA submission summary. We'll talk about those two important topics a little bit later. Now, it's also possible that you will get a section complete page. When will this happen? Well, if you complete your section of the FAFSA, and there are other sections that need to be completed by other contributors, then you will get a section complete page. This will indicate to you that you've completed your section, but that there still remains other sections to be completed on the FAFSA form before it can be submitted. Now, who's a contributor? Well, a contributor is anyone who is required to provide information on your FAFSA form, sign your form, and ultimately provide consent and approval to have federal tax information transferred from the IRS. Contributors, of course, are you, the student, but could also be your spouse if you're an independent married student, or if you're a dependent student, it can be your parents, biological or adoptive parent, or even step parents if applicable. Please note that these completed section complete pages are important because it's a reminder to you that there still is some work to be done in order for your form to be submitted. Now, it's also possible that a contributor can get an abbreviated confirmation page. When would this occur? Well, if you, the student, filled out all of your information, and then later a contributor came in and filled out their information, which then completed your entire FAFSA form, your contributor could actually submit your FAFSA form because all the information is now present. If the contributor submits the FAFSA form, they will receive an abbreviated confirmation page, as you can see here on the screenshot on the slide. Now, this will indicate to the contributor that the FAFSA form is complete, but more importantly, it lets them know that you, the student, will receive the full confirmation pages we discussed earlier via email. Now, the confirmation page is a notification that you have completed your FAFSA form and that you submitted it for processing. Well, how does that differ from the FAFSA submission summary? Why is this summary so important? Well, let's talk about that. Remember that the FAFSA submission summary will include all of the information that you and your contributors provided on your FAFSA form. It provides basic estimates about your eligibility for federal student aid and often will list your official student aid index, or SAI. Now, you can access the FAFSA submission summary after the FAFSA form is processed, and this can take a couple of days. But remember that your parent or spouse contributor will not receive a copy of your FAFSA submission summary, nor will they be able to access the summary online. It's also very important to remember that the FAFSA submission summary is not a financial aid offer. Aid offers will actually come directly from the schools you listed on your FAFSA form that you're ultimately accepted for admission. Dave, that sounds great, but how do I access my FAFSA submission summary? Well, that's a great question. As long as you provide a valid email address on your FAFSA form, whether that's a PDF or hard copy form or online, you'll receive an email with instructions on how to access the FAFSA submission summary. At that point, you'll be able to go into studentaid.gov account, log in under My Activities section on your account dashboard, select your processed FAFSA form submission. And that's important because you might have a couple of submissions listed, so you want to select the correct one you want to view. And once in the FAFSA form, select View FAFSA Submission Summary. Now, it's important to remember that if you did not provide a valid email or do not have an email address, we will send a paper FAFSA submission summary via the postal mail. Of course, this will take a little bit longer than the online version. Now, I mentioned both the FAFSA confirmation page and the FAFSA submission summary. So once again, let's just make sure we understand the differences between the two key documents. Remember that the FAFSA confirmation page will display immediately after you submit a completed FAFSA form online and contains an estimated SAI. Remember that this is a notification to you that you've submitted your FAFSA form once it's completed. The FAFSA submission summary will become available to you after your FAFSA form is processed. You can access your FAFSA submission summary at studentaid.gov account dashboard once you log in. Remember that you will often receive your official SAI in the FAFSA submission summary, but most importantly, it will contain all of your information, all of the answers you provided on the FAFSA form and your contributors provided. This gives you an opportunity to review all of the data you submitted to make sure it's complete and accurate. Now, in both cases, the FAFSA confirmation page and the FAFSA submission summary is not a financial aid offer. Please keep that in mind as we go forward. Now, before we talk about financial aid offers, let's dive just a little bit deeper into the FAFSA submission summary sections. You can see here on this slide, when you pull up the FAFSA submission summary, some very key information will be provided to you. You can see here that we'll let you know when your application was received and the date your application was processed. In addition, in the upper right-hand corner, you can select Print FAFSA Submission Summary. This is important if you want to print a record of your FAFSA submission summary. Now, in addition, there are 4 key sections contained within the FAFSA submission summary. Here you can see the 4 different tabs listed: Eligibility Overview, FAFSA Form Answers, School Information, and Next Steps. Let's take a little bit closer look at each of these areas. Now, the Eligibility Overview section will list your official SAI if it's available. Now, I've mentioned that a couple of times, if it's available. For the most part, you should have an official SAI on your FAFSA submission summary, assuming all of your information has been provided and it's accurate. However, there are times where you might not have an official SAI. One of those times might be if you are a provisionally independent student. If that's the case, your school is required to review your information and make a final determination. Until your school does that, you will not have an official SAI. Now, in addition to the SAI listed in the Eligibility Overview section, you will also see estimates of your federal student aid. Here you can see we would estimate federal Pell Grant, federal work study, or federal direct loans. Now, it's important to note that these are just estimates. These are not your official financial aid offers. As I mentioned earlier, your official financial aid offers will come from the schools you listed on the FAFSA form that you are ultimately admitted into. Now, the FAFSA form answers section is exactly like it sounds. It's a summary of all of the answers you input on your FAFSA form. Now, it's important to remember that it will contain all of the data, except it will not display any federal tax information that was transferred directly from the IRS. This is for data security purposes. I will point out that your school and Department of Education officials do have access to that information if necessary. Now, you'll note that there are a couple of blue drop-down arrows in this section. If you click on those drop-down arrows, it will expand each of the sections so that you can look at the information you provided in detail. At this point, as you're going through the data, if you happen to note that there's an error, maybe a typo or incorrect information was provided, you can start a correction by selecting the Make a Correction button seen here at the top of the tab. We also have a school information section contained within the FAFSA submission summary. This is a great area where you can compare the different schools that you listed on your FAFSA form. You can see in the screenshot here, we've listed several schools, but it contains more than just the name of the schools. We have school graduation rates, retention rates, transfer and default rates, median student loan debt, and average annual cost of attendance. You'll note that in a lot of our websites and materials we provide to students and families, we try to provide as much information as possible. We want you to have all of this wonderful information at your fingertips as you make these very important decisions, especially about which institution you may want to attend. Finally, the last tab in the FAFSA submission summary is the section called Next Steps. This will provide information and any required actions you might need to take. Maybe there's some missing information or a correction needs to be made, or additional information or documentation needs to be provided to your school. You can see in this section you have more drop-down arrows, which once again, if you click on, will expand each section for you to receive more detailed information. Now, I do want to point out in this section, you might also be selected for a process known as verification. Now, verification is a process where the schools will request additional information to help verify the accuracy of certain FAFSA data elements. I want to stress to you that just because you're selected for verification does not mean that you did anything wrong. In fact, sometimes you're just randomly selected. It's important to remember that the school can also select you for verification under their own verification policies as well, and may ask for information related to data elements on the FAFSA form. If you are selected for verification by the department or by the school, it's important that you provide the information requested as quickly and as efficiently as possible. The sooner you get your information in within the deadlines that the school outlines, the school will be able to package your federal and state and school financial aid so that you can get an idea of what you're fully eligible for at the institutions you wish to attend. And before we leave the FAFSA submission summary, I did want to just point out that you can see here in the screenshot, we also provide in the different sections within the FAFSA submission summary, we have resources and references for you. We have links to different websites and assistance such as MyAid or the College Scorecard, which is the Department of Education's college search tool. Again, wherever possible, we try to provide different resources for you so that you can make an informed decision when selecting schools to attend and to help answer questions about financial aid. Now, let's take a moment to do a knowledge check. First question, true or false? You will receive your FAFSA submission summary immediately after you submit the FAFSA form online. Take a few seconds to think about this. Hopefully, if I've done my job, you know that the answer is false. You will not receive a FAFSA submission summary immediately upon submitting your form. That is the FAFSA confirmation page or a section complete page that you would receive. Remember, you won't be able to access your FAFSA submission summary until after your FAFSA form has been processed by the Department of Education. Next question, where can you find your FAFSA submission summary? Is it A, your studentaid.gov account dashboard, B, your school's financial aid office, C, you should ask your mom for a copy, or D, this is only sent to schools, not the student? Take a few seconds to think about this. Well, hopefully the information shared earlier led you to say that the answer is A, your studentaid.gov account dashboard. Remember, after your FAFSA form is processed, you'll be able to access your FAFSA submission summary by logging in to your studentaid.gov account. It's important to remember that only you, the student, can access the FAFSA submission summary. Remember, I mentioned that your other contributors, even your parents, will not receive a copy nor be able to access your FAFSA submission summary online. Final question, true or false? The FAFSA submission summary includes your financial aid offer. And the answer is false. The FAFSA submission summary does not include your financial aid offer. It simply includes estimated federal student aid. Remember that your actual aid offers are going to come from the schools that you listed on your FAFSA form that ultimately you are admitted into. Now, we've mentioned financial aid offers quite a bit. So let's talk about why they're important, where they come from, how to compare them. So a financial aid offer, sometimes called award letters at institution, tells you what aid you can receive at a particular college, career school, or trade school. Now, it's important to remember that an aid offer will include all of your financial aid and types and amounts. This includes federal, state, private, and school aid. Breaks it down often by indicating if they're grants or scholarships, work study funds, or loan funds. It's a lot of information contained in this aid offer, and it's so important that you carefully read through it so you understand the types and amounts of aid you're eligible for. Now, your aid offers will come from the schools you listed on the FAFSA form where you're accepted for admission. Often they're sent electronically via email, and you can often access them through secure school websites. Now, if you have any questions about your aid offer, you have concerns about what's presented, please do not reach out to the U.S. Department of Education because we did not develop the aid offers. Remember, it's the schools that provide the aid offers. So reach out to the school's financial aid office if you have concerns or questions about the aid offer you received. When you're going through your aid offers, it could be a little overwhelming. There's a lot of information. You have all different types of financial aid and amounts listed. And it's important for you to remember that you can choose which parts you want to accept. Just because a school offers you a certain type of financial aid doesn't mean you have to accept it. Remember, if you have any grants or scholarships, that's money you don't have to pay back. It's free money, and that's where I would start. You might also have listed some work study funds, and that can be important and can help you in your college career. But remember that you're going to have to work, provide a service to receive those funds. So you want to make sure that you have the time to do a part-time job while attending your studies. And lastly, there may be loans listed. Loans are an essential part of financial aid and may be necessary to help you pay all the expenses for you to attend school. However, remember, it is a loan, which means it has to be paid back and interest often accrues. I tell all my students and families that when borrowing, remember to borrow only what you actually need to cover your actual expenses. Finally, you may apply to several different schools, and hopefully you get into all of the schools you're attempting to be admitted into. Congratulations. But now you may have financial aid offers from several different schools. So let's compare those offers. How should you evaluate them? Well, first and foremost, aside from receiving the aid offers, you need to find out what the cost of attendance is at each of the schools and the programs you're attending at the different schools. Remember that a cost of attendance is an average calculation of the total cost for a student to attend a school throughout an entire school year or academic year. Now, this includes tuition and fees, but is much more than tuition and fees. Often students and families focus on the cost of tuition, which can be relatively high at different schools. But remember that you, the student, have to live at that school for an entire year. There are a lot of other expenses that will have to be covered, including housing, food, books, supplies, equipment, transportation, just to name a few. So cost of attendance, again, is the total cost that it will take for you to cover the educational expenses while you're attending school for a year. You can find your school's cost of attendance on their website. It should be fairly easy to find, often broken down by program as well. If you can't find your school's cost of attendance or have questions, again, reach out directly to that school's financial aid office. Now, once you have your cost of attendance, we need to find out the net price for each of the schools you might attend. The net price, sometimes called the net cost, is an estimate of the out-of-pocket expenses that you will need to pay each year for a particular school. The net price can be found by subtracting any grants or scholarships you're offered from that particular school's cost of attendance. Let's look at an example. So here you see a school has a cost of attendance of $9,500. Now remember, that cost of attendance is more than just tuition and fees. That's all of those living expenses we talked about. We then subtract out the grants and scholarships. Remember, this is free money, money you're not going to have to pay back. And it leaves you with the net price. In this example, $5,100. This is an estimated cost that you will have to come up with to cover all of your potential expenses while attending school for that particular school year. How you pay for those funds is up to you. You might have savings and be able to pay a large percentage of that. Your parents may step in with some funding that they may have that they've saved through various plans and opportunities. You may end up working, or you may have a current job that you're going to continue working, or you may obtain a work study job at your institution to help pay, or you may borrow various types of loans to help cover this. You have lots of options, and that's what you have to think about when you're comparing the net price from school to school. What is that out-of-pocket expense? So as you're comparing the different net prices from the different schools you're looking at potentially attending, remember that the school with the highest cost of attendance does not necessarily mean that they may have the highest net price. It all depends on the grants and scholarships you may be offered at the different schools. Lots of different things go into what's ultimately offered to you. Your enrollment status, the type of program, the academic year or grade level that you're in may all impact the types of aid you receive. Again, I do want to point out that if you do need to borrow loans, again, just be conscious of how much you're borrowing and really try to only borrow what you actually need to cover your true expenses. Remember, if during the school year you realize you underborrowed and you underestimated and you have larger expenses, you can go back to the financial aid office and ask them to increase your aid eligibility up to your full eligibility if necessary. So just keep that in mind. One other tool I want to bring to your attention when you're comparing schools is the U.S. Department of Education's college scorecard. Here you can see a screenshot where we have pulled up several schools that a student can compare various data points. Here you're able to search for schools based on size, location, programs, costs, and you can see we provide various types of information such as graduation rates, post-school earnings, and post-school loan debt. You can find all of this information at collegescorecard.ed.gov. Remember, we always want you to have the best and most variable information that you can have so that you can make an informed decision when deciding on what school to ultimately attend. After all, this is going to be one of your biggest decisions you ever make in your life. Now, let's do a final knowledge check before we move on. Question number 1. Where will your financial aid offers come from? Is it A, the U.S. Department of Education, B, all schools you listed on your FAFSA form, C, schools you listed on your FAFSA form that accepted you for admission, or D, your high school guidance counselor? Take a few seconds to think about the answer. Hopefully, you came up with C, schools you listed on your FAFSA form that accepted you for admission. That is where your financial aid offers will come from. It's also important to remember that you can add or remove schools from the FAFSA form. You can do this by selecting your processed FAFSA submission in the My Activities section of your studentaid.gov account dashboard, and then select Add or Remove Schools. It's important to remember that you can list up to 20 institutions on your FAFSA form online, and up to 10 schools on a PDF or hard copy FAFSA. If you've already maxed out your number of schools and you want to add some new schools you're interested in, remember you will have to take off a few schools that you're no longer interested in to replace them with the new schools. Question number 2, true or false? A school's cost of attendance includes only tuition expenses. Hopefully this was an easy one for you, and the answer is false. It's a misconception commonly seen by students and families where they focus just on tuition and fees. But remember that to attend an institution, there are lots of different costs that are going to be incurred throughout the school year. So the cost of attendance factors in much more than just tuition and fees. As you can see here, it factors in food, housing, books, supplies, transportation, loan fees, miscellaneous expenses, and some other specialty fees depending on student situations, such as childcare, dependent care, disability-related costs. Finally, question number 3. What is the net price for a 2- or 4-year college? Is it A, the amount of federal student aid offered by the U.S. Department of Education, B, the amount of financial aid offered by your school, C, the total out-of-pocket costs for your entire degree program, or D, your estimated out-of-pocket costs for 1 school year? Take a few seconds. This one might be a little tricky. Well, hopefully, again, if I did my job, you came up with D. Net price is your estimated out-of-pocket cost for 1 school year. Remember, you'll determine the net price by subtracting your grants and scholarships from your school's cost of attendance. Now, you do have to determine your net price each year you're in school. So that becomes important to remember if you're in a multi-year program, such as an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. That cost, that out-of-pocket cost, is extrapolated each year that you are in attendance. Now, if you happen to be attending a 1-year program or a program shorter than a year, which definitely happens, we have many post-secondary diplomas and certificate programs out there, then the net price may cover your costs for the entire program. Finally, I just want to leave you with a few additional resources and references after this session is over. I can't stress enough, if you are not familiar with studentaid.gov, to please check out the website. Studentaid.gov is a wonderful wealth of information that contains a ton of information regarding federal financial aid from A to Z, from the very beginning of when you apply for federal financial aid to the end when you graduate and you actually may have to repay loans. It has contact information, links, websites, help articles, training materials. So please explore this website. Take some time to play around with it and really understand the information. We want you to have as much key information as possible when you're making these very important decisions. And I also want to point out to remember that federal student aid is also on various social media platforms. As you can see here, we have a presence on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. This is important for you to follow us and be aware of this, because at times we provide announcements and provide important resources to you, as well as timely communications when information becomes available that we want to share with our students and families. And that, my friends, concludes our session today on understanding the FAFSA submission summary and financial aid offers. I can't thank you enough. I hope this is beneficial to you as you continue your financial aid journey. Thanks, and as always, have a great day.